Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmates. This is the Group 7 and we will discuss the Module 4. These are the members of the Group 7. The first topic will be the National Building Code of the Philippines, which is already discussed by the Group 6. So what is Building Code? The main purpose of Building Code is to provide minimum standards to be followed by the professionals to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare as they relate to the construction and occupancy of buildings and structures. And just like any other national building codes, the National Building Code of the Philippines sets the rules and regulations that applies to the construction of buildings in our country. In 1970s, the Philippines' growth in population and its thriving urbanization made the economic and physical development fluctuate. Its rapid growth became the reason why it is required to establish Republic Act No. 6541 to regulate the construction industry, which is an act to ordain and institute a national building code of the Philippines. But at this time, this law does not conform to the country's developmental goals, and to keep up the building standards on par with the technological advancement in 1972, the nullification of Republic Act 6541 took place. The Republic Act 6541 is then replaced in 1977 by Presidential Decree 1096, which is known as the Official National Building Codes of the Philippines, where all the procedures are currently managed by the Department of Public Works and Highways. And throughout the implementation of this code, it has achieved its purpose of enforcing standardization on building requirements, where all intentions were all geared towards the general goal of building codes for securing better health, life, property, and public welfare. The continuous technological advancement globally is one of the reasons why we are required to revise the implemented National Building Code, which led to the formulation of its latest revision published in 2005, which currently being used by the local building design and construction industry. And for homogeneity and clarity, it was later entitled as Implementing Rules and Regulations of the National Building Code of the Philippines, Presidential Decree 1096, with its rules and regulation mimicking the same formatting of its 1977 counterpart. These are the rules that is stated in the revised Implementing Rules and Regulations of the National Building Code of the Philippines, Presidential Decree 1096. These rules had already been discussed by the Group 6 and we will only discuss each of these briefly. The rule number 1 is General Provisions, where it states its applications, exceptions, and safe distance of the structures from any hazardous place determined by the competent authorities to apply the essence of the building code, which is to protect both lives and properties. The rule number 2 is Administration and Enforcement, where it states who is enforcing the building code and who are the officials that are separate and distinct from the office of the municipal engineers in all cities. Also includes the violations and penal provisions with a schedule of fines and schedule of fees for building permits, abatement, and demolitions. The rule number 3 is Permits and Inspections, where it states that building permits should be secured before construction. There are ancillary permits, which is the basic permits, the accessory permits, and also occupancy permits after the building is already constructed and fully functional. The rule number 4 is Types of Constructions, where it states that there are 5 types of constructions using different materials and has different level of fire resistivity, with Type 5 having the strongest materials and highest fire resistivity throughout its structures. The rule number 5 is Requirements of Fire Zones, where Bureau of Fire Protection determines the fire zone location and will require the level of fire resistivity that the structure should have depending on the project's location. While the rule number 6 is Fire Resistive Requirements in Construction. In connection with the previous rules, you will be able to determine the required thickness of the materials being used in accordance to the required fire resistivity. The rule number 7 is Classification and General Requirements of all buildings by use or occupancy, where in general we are able to know the building's typology, along with its use and classification. And lastly, the zoning classification that is in conformity with the zoning map of the local government unit or LGU, depending on the type of building, whether it is for residential, commercial, or any other. The rule number 8 is Light and Ventilation, which focuses on the design of buildings to allow natural light and ventilation to enter the building, along with site occupancy percentage and designs of public structures building setbacks, and many more provisions. Rule number 9 is sanitations, which talks about the water supply system, drainage system, and wastewater disposal systems, along with pest control and noise control, and piping materials. This rule is further discussed in detail on the sanitation code and plumbing code. The rule number 10 is projection over public streets. It talks about the details of the structures that may project into the public streets, like arcades, balconies, canopies, doors, windows, and chaflans. This rule is further discussed in detail in structural code. Rule 11 is protection of pedestrian during construction or demolition. It talks about what is not allowed to be done on public streets during construction, protection of utilities and walkways, pedestrian protection and maintenance and removal of protected device, and lastly, the process of demolitions. The rule number 12 is general design and construction requirements. The designs, requirements, and details are all stated in this rule and can be checked or verified with other codes depending on what discipline is being confirmed. Rule number 13 is electrical and mechanical regulations. The electrical systems installed shall conform to the provisions of the PEC or Philippine Electrical Code, along with the mechanical systems that shall conform to the provisions of the PMC or Philippine Mechanical Code. After the Rule 13, the succeeding rules are listed here. These rules will not be discussed since it is only applicable to special construction projects. The next topic is the National Structural Code of the Philippines, which will be discussed by one of our group members.
National Structural Code of the Philippines or NSCP. The purpose of this code is to provide minimum requirements for the design of buildings, towers, and other vertical structures, and minimum standards and guidelines to safeguard life or limb, property, and public welfare by regulating and controlling the design, construction, quality of materials pertaining to the structural aspects of all buildings and structures within this jurisdiction. NSCP has 7 chapters. Chapter 1 is the general requirements. The provision of this code shall apply to the construction, alteration, moving, demolition, repair, maintenance, and use of buildings, towers, and other vertical structures within this jurisdiction. Special structures such as but not limited to single-family dwellings, storage silos, liquid product tanks, and hydraulic flood control structure shall be referred to special state of practice literature. Where there is a conflict between a general requirement and a specific requirement, the specific requirement shall be applicable. Chapter 2. Minimum Design Loads. This chapter provides minimum design load requirements for the design of buildings, towers, and other vertical structures. Loads and appropriate load combination which have been developed to be used together for strength design and allowable stress design are set forth. Chapter 3. Earthworks and Foundations. This chapter set forth requirements for excavations, fills, footings, and foundations for any building or structure. Chapter 4. Structural Concrete. This chapter has 29 sections. This chapter provides minimum requirement for the design and construction of structural concrete elements of any building or other structure under requirements of the National Building Code of the Philippines, of which this chapter of the NSCP Volume 1 forms a part. This chapter also covers the strength evaluation of existing concrete structures. For structural concrete, it should not be less than 17 megapascals. The number of maximum values of it shall apply unless restricted by a specific code provision. Chapter 5. Structural Steel. This chapter sets forth criteria for the design, fabrication, and erection of structural steel buildings and other structures, where other structures are defined as those structures designed, fabricated, and erected in the manner similar to buildings with building-like vertical and lateral load-resisting elements. Where conditions are not covered by this chapter, designs are permitted to be based on tests or analysis, subject to the approval of the authority having jurisdiction. Alternate methods of analysis and design shall be permitted, provided such alternate methods or criteria are acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction. Chapter 6. Wood. The provisions of this chapter shall govern the materials, design, construction, and quality of wood members and their fasteners. The design shall be based on one of the following methods. Working stress design. Design using working stress design methods shall resist the different load combination in accordance with the applicable requirements of Section 604. Conventional light frame construction. The design and construction of conventional light frame wood structure shall be in accordance with the applicable requirements of Section 604 and the NSCB Volume 3 Housing. Chapter 7. Masonry. The materials, design, construction, and quality assurance of masonry shall be in accordance with this chapter. Masonry shall comply with the provisions of one of the following design methods in this chapter, as well as the requirements of sections 701 through 705. Those are the 7 chapters of NSCP. Thank you.
The next group member will discuss the Fire Code of the Philippines.
Fire Code of the Philippines or FCP was also known as Republic Act 9514. It is a law that governs the prevention and suppression of all destructive fires and governs professionalization of fire services. FCP also ensures public safety and promote economic development. Fire Code of the Philippines guides the BFP in implementing laws with regards to fire to prevent or avoid all kinds of fire that leads to destruction. It also helps reduce risk of injury and death. BFP or Bureau of Fire Protection is an agency under Department of the Interior and Local Government or DILG that provides emergency medical, rescue services, and enforce other fire-related laws with active involvement of community. BFP stated as their philosophy that we serve so that others may live. As a public safety agency, their organization adheres to doctrine of life preservation in event of emergency, disaster, and calamity. Under Section 4, Fire Code of the Philippines is applicable to all persons, private and public buildings, facilities or structures erected or constructed before and after its effectivity. The next one is the grace period under Fire Code of the Philippines, Section 5. It stated that the owner or occupant of the building or structures existing at the time of the effectivity of the Fire Code is only given 2 years to comply with the provision on fire safety constructions and on protective and warning systems. However, the Director General of Integrated National Police may prescribe a shorter period depending upon the degree of hazard to be recorded and the cost and extent of the work to be done. Next is the responsibility for enforcement of this code under Section 6. Fire service under the direct supervision and control of the Director General of the Integrated National Police shall be responsible for the enforcement of this code. In Section 10, Abatement of Fire Hazard. Fire hazard shall be abated immediately. Next is penalties or Section 12 stated that any person who violates any provision of the Fire Code or any of the rules and regulations promulgated under Section 6, which is the responsibility for the enforcement of this code, shall be penalized by an administrative fine of not exceeding 12,000 pesos, or in the proper case, by stoppage of operations or by closure of such buildings, structures, and their premises or facilities which do not comply with the requirements.
So the next topic will be the Philippine Electrical Code, which is already discussed by the Group 5, and we're just gonna give additional information regarding this topic. So let's start with the scope of works. So PEC, or Philippine Electrical Code, included the installation of electrical conductors as well as optical fiber cables and anything installed within or on, to, or from public and private buildings, electrical generating plants, temporary and permanent substations, industrial plants, transformer stations, railway switchyards, yards, carnival, parking, watercraft, dockyards, airfields, quarries and mines, mobile homes, travel trailers, recreational vehicles, offshore facilities, other premises which requires electrical installation except to those which are done in aircraft, motor vehicles, and railway rolling stocks. Next is the permits and inspection certificates. A permit is required before undertaking any electrical installation. An inspection is also required, after which certificate of final electrical inspection or CFEI is issued by the authority. There is also an exception that a permit is not required for the installation of electrical portable equipment rated not more than 1200 voltage ampere. Lastly, a permit is not required for the reconnection of disconnected service due to non-payment of electrical bill or change of occupants for a period of 1 year.
And that will be all the topics that we will discuss in Module 4. These are the references we use for the discussion, and thank you for listening.